James Lambert.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me? Everybody interested in a bit of growth today? Because that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be thinking and talking and trying to share some experiences about how we grow businesses. And that introduction all sounded very good, but that isn't the day job. Going for growth. When I was asked by Yorkshire Forward to talk about something, I thought, well, actually, growth is really the most important thing all of us in business have to think about. Because growth is the only thing, and as I thought, I've never done this before, by the way, I thought, well, people who do this all the time come out with some smart-ass statement. But I thought, so I'd come up with one. And I thought that just shows you how I've grown over the years. Also, some bits, probably, I suppose, you would never trust a thin ice cream man, so some bits are growing too much. Anyway, a quick brief history, and the idea is to try and weave through some of the challenges and opportunities that we've had over the years, which has always driven growth, and some of the if you like, some of the tools of the trade which we all band around, which we've always taken very seriously, like actually going and understanding about strategy. And I'll just ask you, how many of you in a year spend more than a day on strategy? Hands up. Yeah, that's pretty good. And what about on business planning? I hope all of you can put your hands up for that. But anyway, everybody. But strategy to me is the absolute key because, technology's not. Which one do we press that one? So those are the things that I thought would make it a more interesting discussion later on, and obviously ask questions at the end if you'd like. So, who are the stakeholders in the business? I mean, the basis of all businesses to me are exactly the same, and so are all organisations. There's the people that you work with. There's the people that supply you. There's the people who are the customers or the consumers of your products, and there are investors, and that can be, governments, that can be obviously financial investments, but if it's a charity, it can be people who are investing their time in the organisation. And the most important thing that I spend my 25 years doing is trying to get the best out of all those four groups of people. Because without that, if you get distorted, that the investors take too much money, there isn't enough for the suppliers to think, well, this is a great organisation. The customers think, well, the prices aren't very good because the equipment's getting old and it's not the most efficient. So getting the balance of an organisation that you're involved with is the most important thing. And I call that the point of optimum velocity. In other words, the more you can get all those groups of people which make an organisation together, the faster you can go. And it really is that simple, but it is also that important. And all strategies need to include all those groups of people. There's absolutely no way thinking, well, my strategy is to get rich and I'm the investor. Because without the rest, it doesn't work. So to achieve this, what are the things that we continually try and do? Well, we try and behave consistently with everybody. I will find a customer if I think they're trying to take the prices down too much and we don't want to do business with them. Because I know there won't be enough for the other three groups of people. And it's the same way with investors. If the dividends or the take from the investors is too high, then there isn't going to be enough left to grow the business at optimum speed. But what you'll actually find is that if you explain what the organisation is about and what you're doing with them, actually everybody wants to invest more. So you get more money from the investors, you get better people joining your organisation, and you get a general impetus. And an impetus is something that perhaps is the key, I think, to growing an organisation. And to do that, you have to plan 2 or 3 years ahead all the time. It doesn't happen tomorrow. Tomorrow is all about, the traffic that's coming down the road. We all have plenty of traffic, and I'm lucky enough probably now that I have less traffic than a lot of the people that work with me have. But I very much try and aim the future. And I suspect the other thing that all successful organisations have is they keep innovating, whether it's products, whether it's services, whether it's the the customers that we're supplying, their routes to market, they're always innovative. And I'll talk about some of these things a bit later. But I think focus is such a key part of growing a business. And it's something that we have continually kept focused. So the things that we're doing today are exactly the same things we're doing 25 years ago, but on a much bigger scale and in a much more sophisticated way. I'm going to do it with you today, but I spend a lot of my time as well sharing the vision of the organisation, because if people don't believe in your organisation or vision, how are they going to get the best people to come and work for you? How are you going to get the right customers to come and want to trade with you? And so on. So these things are always going around in the circle, but they are the absolute key to growth. We are a very, very open organisation. Anybody, by the Wednesday of this week, they can see every single number that's produced anywhere in the organisation, any factory, whether it's buying prices, the selling prices, how much the usage variance have been, whether we've had too many promotions or whatever. They're all on a very simple pieces of paper, and any of the 3,500 employees can see them. Now what that does is it means that there's no hiding places for anybody. Not for me, and if there isn't any for me, and I learned that from a public company, why should there be for anybody else? Everybody has got a performance, some way of measuring their organisation, and for me it's very important that people really care about it. And what they do in return for that, of sharing information, is wanting to improve on it. And this continuous circle of improvement, because you know what the past has already done, is we find really helpful. We all know it, but growth really is cash flow, and cash flow is fertilizer. You can make all the choices you like in the future, but if you haven't got something to pay for it, there are no choices. And so positive cash flow for me is absolutely key. So any budgets that don't have a positive cash flow, they don't exist. And we, right from the start, have been like that. And the more fertilizer you have, the more cash you can produce, the faster you can go. The more of those 4 groups of people you can get involved with your business and your organisation. So that's the other thing. People want to feel secure. The world is an insecure place for most of us. And one of the things that sharing all this knowledge and making people feel secure, because they are secure, is a great place to work. And lots of people don't want to be entrepreneurs. They just want to come to work, do a good job in an exciting, fun, successful organisation. And it's so key that that is also shared. It's not all the bad stuff, it's the good stuff, it's the fun of success. So, we've all got these, and I'll just put up mine. Those are the sort of absolute planks to us. And when we started, it was in Yorkshire, and then we got a bit bolder. Maybe 20 years ago, we got into Morrison's, which took us sort of into Lancashire. Nice place to go, Lancashire. And then Europe. And the really interesting thing to me is if we put Asia on there, or we put America on there, we would behave in exactly the same way that we behaved 20 years ago in our business. So it's just a matter of scaling it up. And some of you, particularly some of the modern, fast-moving internet businesses, can go global very quickly. So getting the absolute DNA of the organisation is so important at the beginning, because without it, you get dragged off on tangents. And for me, so many organisations don't go at optimum velocity because the boss is bored and he goes, well, I'm going to try that, or let's get involved with that. Well, if he wants to do that, that's fine. But the organisation shouldn't be dragged around like that because it's so unproductive. And those are our simple competitive advantages. And whether you're a school or whether you're running a nightclub or whatever you're doing, understanding your competitive advantages and behaving in a way that you share them is also key. So a little bit I thought about us, and I'm not going to take you through all the steps, but I'm going to take you through the thinking that went on. Because we started with £40,000 and 5 employees. It wasn't a big bang start. There wasn't a huge money-raising occupation. Jonathan Rockmer, who'd already started 1 or 2 other businesses in North Yorkshire, and I had a cattle breeding business as well with Johnny. We just got into it, and there was 1 or 2 other people as well. And for the first 10 years, all we did was keep our heads down and try to get better at what we were doing, and I'll come back to that. Those are some of the factories that we have now, and indeed the one in Poland we're doubling the size of, and I'll talk about Leaving Bar because that's being doubled in the size of as well, and I'll talk about the story of how we got there. But at the start, we actually started with that bottom left-hand building and the one opposite it where those tanks are outside. All the rest weren't there, and we rented it off English estates. And you can see what we did was we just thought we'll do 2-litre ice cream, family tubs of ice cream, but we'll get really good at it. We won't get into any periphery. We'll be the best tub ice cream manufacturer we possibly can. And you can see how we sweated that asset with all those people working in there, night and day. And out of that, we got a business that was generating cash, was lower cost than anybody else, but also was higher quality than anybody else at the time. And that gave us a seat at all the supermarkets' tables, because every supermarket had to have 2 litres. We then repeated it by buying Treats in Leeds, which was making all the ice lollies, and had a few brands, and it also had an impulse business, which is out on the road with the little boxes where we go by. But again, they were by far the biggest. They had 75% of that little sector of the market. So that was 2 reasons we had to climb up the steps to big supermarkets and go and have a sensible conversation with them. We then bought Allied, which was part of ABF, which they own Primark and British Sugar and so on. And interesting enough, in big companies, they're always looking to consolidate their businesses into the ones that they can make most money out of. And so sometimes you can find some of the best businesses that you want to either join up with or take over, or inside big businesses. Because once they decide to get rid of it, it's non-core, it just goes. It's not particularly an emotional transaction, and it allowed us to deal with some more customers and start making cones and sticks, Magnum type sticks and super premium ice cream. And so and they had 4 factories, all underinvested in, all have gone now. And then in 2001, I have to say, as those aeroplanes on 9/11 were going into the Twin Towers, we had signed this that morning, and we were just shocked by what then happened for the rest of the day, because this was going to be our great day. So we took, from being an own label business, it's the same factories, it's the same products, but it's a different set of skills because you've got some brands. So we had to learn a few new skills about some of the brands that we got hold of. And then, right at the end, there's always somebody who will do a price in any market. They tend to go bust. Dorema went bust, and we bought this business for the property value, and got a £20 million turnover business in the throes. Because the only thing that they traded on was price, and price is not sustainable. And it's determined by forces that aren't in your control, and it gets, your guys work so hard, and then there's no bonuses, there's no new machinery, there's no innovation, and so on. But it brought us in with Aldi and Lidl. So you saw that top building where I showed you on the top right-hand side. Where we are now is there. We have just completing a bigger car park, and all that is under construction, and we are building and spending over £25 million up at Leaving Bar at the moment. And this, by the time it's finished, will be employing 700 full-time employees. It will be producing 200 million litres of ice cream, and it will be Europe's largest ice cream factory. So that was in 25 years. The innovation and the engineering skills, because those were the things that we thought were absolutely key for our business. It's easier to concentrate them in smaller places, because the real best engineers, it's like the best surgeons. If you needed a heart operation, if the best surgeon was in Leeds and not in, Wakefield, you travel to Leeds for it. And it's the same with engineering. There just aren't. It's not there aren't bad engineers, that the really best ones are so clever. And so, we are investing there. And so Leaving Bar now produces, and you can see the extra space and the innovation that's coming into it. So that is what's happening there, and that's not finished yet. So what about suppliers? The second most important group of people, I think, are suppliers. And I don't know if any of you ever go up the A1 and pass Borough Bridge or live near Borough Bridge. You'll see that this is Reed Bordell when we started with them. And I knew very early on that lorries and cold stores and all those forklift trucks and all that issue of dealing with supply chains wasn't going to be our bag. We didn't think that was. And so we were very happy to partner Reed Bordell in them building a very successful business on the back of us. And they have done. And if you look at the top right-hand corner, you see some poplar trees. I haven't got a pointer. And if you look here, those are the same poplar trees 25 years later, and they're just building that building on the left. They are now by far the most successful, lowest cost supplier of frozen food into the UK market. And we are still their biggest customer, but we aren't 25% of their business anymore. And when we really got going and started pushing some volume through that system, we were about 40% of their business. But so you can see, for us, yeah, we have conflicts sometimes about price. Who wouldn't? You know, that's just normal. But the design is for us never to go into transport. We have failed with our negotiation, and never to have to invest any of our money in distribution, transport, frozen food. And so we haven't. And they have been great suppliers to us. As we grew, we wanted to add a few more brands to the business, and the reason for that is that they play a different role to own label, and we're all consumers. And so you can see we went and were offered a lovely business in Cornwall called Kelly's Ice Cream. It is all made down there. It is genuine Cornish ice cream, and actually the growth this year I think will be even greater than those previous 3 years, and it allows us to compete with Unilever. I just thought I'd put on a little advert. Whether or not my technology will allow that to happen, I don't know. Does that work? No. It doesn't. Is that going here? No. Right on it. Cornish weather.
Kelly's Cornish Ice Cream. Simple pleasure.
Good, eh? Let me just see if I can get that right. I can. I'll quick drink that water. This is sometimes you can't either afford to buy the brands. In fact, we haven't. We've tended to lease all ours, except for Kelly's and one or two others. Yumi, which we talked about now. But sometimes you can help your customers create new ones. And this was Tesco not wanting for you to go along and buy in labels. So we thought we can't compete with Ben and Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs. So we'll go to Tesco and we'll try and create them a brand, which has all the values of a brand, but isn't seen as own label, and people will perhaps pay more for it. So we've created this, and I think this year, and we're starting to manufacture it in Poland as well. I think in this year, which is the second year, it will sell £8 million worth, and we're starting to sell some of the chock-a-block sticks outside Tesco to other retailers. So that's an interesting way for us of looking at when you can't get into a market, how do you get in? And it took 2 or 3 years of thinking about to get to this position for us. Again, who hasn't been to McDonald's and seen that McFlurry stuff? Well, it's the biggest ice cream in the UK, but it's fresh ice cream. We don't make fresh ice cream, we make frozen ice cream. So how could we compete with them? So we sort of thought, well, we'll put McFlurry in a little tub and launch it with all these brands on it. And you know, it has been really successful, and we're going to relaunch it this year because we can make it better. So it was just taking something that somebody else had produced or made for it, and finding a solution to market. And this is something you're going to get bombarded with this year, which is Yumu, which is frozen yogurt. Obviously, the Americans are big into this. Again, it's a new sector, but we thought we'd pioneer it, and we invested in it. We've been making TV adverts for it, and you'll see it on your TVs in May and June. It'll be in the stores in the next couple of weeks. It's delicious. Try it. There's angel moo and devil moo and strawberry moo and all sorts of moos. So you can imagine how much fun the marketing guys are having mooing along with this. Change always happens. You know, when we started those 2-litre tubs, we used to go along to Morrison's had 41 stores. It would get into all 41 stores, obviously, and that would be how it was sold. And you might have a top label on it, and you might have a side label on it. In those days, we just had top labels on it. Now, when you launch something, there are so many more medias and so many more routes to market from supermarkets that they have small stores and big ones and so on, and there are different action alleys and promotion things. So getting your mind around all the changes all the time is something that we think stimulates the growth of the business. So why Europe? Why didn't we go along and buy Delpac next door up the sale room in frozen beef boats? After all, we bought Delva down the road. Supermarkets, we knew them all, but actually we knew absolutely nothing about that market. We knew absolutely nothing about their factories. We knew nothing about the vegetable or the dessert market. But what we did know was about ice cream, how the retailers reacted and bought it, how the factories worked, how innovation worked. And so I just said, listen, I don't want to go and start consolidating the UK frozen food market. I want to go to Europe. And when you start, if you following, you know, a business plan like us, when you go to start to consolidate or invest in the market, you've got to go for the biggest and best assets first. There's no point starting buying some small ice cream factory in Portugal when the absolute food industry is run by the Germans. The 3 biggest retailers in Europe are in Germany and Aldi and Lidl, Arebe, which is a cooperative. And so for us, to me, if we couldn't compete in Germany, we wouldn't be able to make this success to get into the rest of Europe and not stick with frozen food in the UK. So we bought this factory with, and we've been on the stock market. The other thing is I want to get off the stock market, get into private ownership again. The shares have gone up 12 times in 7 years. Been a good investment for us all, but we've never used it, never raised any money on it. But we found it in private equity, and I'll talk a bit about that at the end of this time. But it's a great place to use private long-term investors in your business. This was the factory we bought. We gained a huge number of new customers, so we started to deal with everybody. And in Ronkedin there, they had gone bankrupt 3 years before because in those days, 3 of their customers accounted for about 50% of the business, and they had all their world pricing in small areas on all those other customers. They didn't have any relationships. They didn't have any relationships because there wasn't enough innovation. So the buyers didn't really need to see the guys from here because there was nothing new coming out of it. It was always, what's your price? And that's changed dramatically. I don't know how you finance your businesses, but the financing world has changed dramatically for all of us. When we took the business private, we went to, in 2006, Deutsche Bank, and Deutsche Bank acted for us and raised us 328 million euros. And at the time that they did that, they had a syndicate debt, and we didn't talk to any other bankers, but suddenly our debt was owned by, or we were invested by 41 other, or 46 other banks. And I thought, great, 46 banks know something about our business. How stupid can you be? There were 45 banks that knew nothing about our business, and there was the basis of the financial crisis which we're all living in. You know, the bankers were lending money to people and businesses of which they knew absolutely nothing about. But I thought the opposite. And once that reality came, I knew that we had to get out. You cannot have 41 relationships. You can't have 7 relationships unless you're a huge company and can start dictating your terms on them. So we went and decided that the bond, even though it's going to be much more expensive, would be a much more long-term benefit for us continuing to build a business. And so we thanks to Barclays in Leeds and 1 or 2 other banks, Credit Suisse, made in London, we've gone into the bond market. We had already paid back nearly 200 million of the debt that we had 5 years before. So we're very cash generative business, which is of course what bankers like to lend money to. But we still couldn't have a relationship, and so the bond has been a great thing. It is more expensive, but there are no covenants. As long as they can get their money back at the end after 7 years, that's all that matters to them. So there's a lot less management for us of having a bond, even though you have to talk to your bond holders 3 or 4 times a year, 4 times a year, you have quarterly reporting from. The stock market is the equity bit, the bond market is the debt bit. You'll see a lot more, because the banks will never go back to syndicate lending like they did. You'll see a lot more bonds and equivalents, and I'm trying to encourage the government to produce a way like they have in America of small bonds being backed by regional growth funds. So typically a business that wanted 10 million, for instance, could get into this bond market and bypass the banks. It's falling on deaf ears at the moment, but it takes a long time for good ideas to get going. That's what funds American businesses. It's how America works. It always has worked that way. It's never had a lot of interbank lending. It's always had a lot of that. So in Europe, we ended up with 3 or 4 factories in Germany. We started shutting them down and spending millions and millions. We've spent 80 million on putting in new machinery into these factories and innovation. We wanted a brand. I tried to persuade Nestle that they would be better to let us have their ice cream businesses across Europe, and Mars to sell them theirs, but I couldn't. So eventually, knocking on the door of Kraft, who are a very aggressive, very fast-moving, very productive company. As you know, they bought Cadbury in the UK, and I know we see them through political eyes rather than economic eyes. Economically, they've done extremely well and are doing so in Europe. So we've now got the chance to build a whole portfolio of branded business in Europe, and some of those products you'll start to see coming in. This is for 2 to 3 years ahead. So this is the pipeline. We've launched those little pots, which on the 1st of April they'll be launched, and these over the next 2 or 3 years. And also, we acquired through Pilper, which was a business we bought in the south of France back end of last year, all the Disney brands, and so it gives us another branded outlet. So we're always trying to help our customers, which is why, going back to that first slide, to sell more. How can we help them sell more? And with brands and own label, and maximising the use of space in their stores, because that's all retailers do, is sell space to manufacturers and suppliers. They allow us to try and get the right range for all the consumers that are coming into their stores. So again, it's another opportunity. We'll unlock this over the next 2 or 3 years, and we will have a lot of fun with it. I just wanted to talk about quickly a little bit about what strategy is, and why it is so important, and why, if you really want long-term growth, you have to get into this stuff. And it's hard work, because it's going to produce a lot of change projects. It's going to make you change your organisations and take the opportunities which you all have. And it is hard stuff, this. And a lot of people find this very uncomfortable, because it really is opening you up to some of the things that you, particularly as entrepreneurs, business people, working in businesses, don't want to do. It's change. But go with people, go with all the sharing of information. People actually love change in the end. So, strategy is what the organisation is going to do, and the business plan is how you're going to do it. Now, a lot of people do not really understand the difference between those two. Our strategy hasn't really changed. We've gone from Yorkshire, and we got to Lancashire, then to the UK, then to Europe, and we could take ours strategy anywhere. But there are lots of change projects required to keep that strategy alive, and so planning is the how. And I suppose this is the real reason, is that in the past things were pretty slow moving. Nothing happened very quickly. Old Mr. Ford said you could have any car as long as it's black. Well, you can imagine running an organisation like that. They're much, much more sophisticated, and the world is moving much faster. So, allowing our businesses to evolve and evolve quicker is going to be a real challenge for us, and something that absolutely we are at the forefront of. And this is the reason. Again, many industries are becoming more chaotic. Business is becoming more chaotic. The changes, the opportunities. You can have created a business in technology, and a year later, somebody else has come away with a better technology. So really understanding what it is that you want to invest in your organisations and the things you want to take forward is so important. And these are just the basis of how many people in your organisations know the answers to some of this stuff and have the tools to do it. It's what drives our business, and we aren't in a very fast-growing market. We plod along at 2 or 3%. We complain about the weather. We look at the weather forecasts from March right the way through to October every day, and we sort of, can we just move that high a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left and get it absolutely right over London and Birmingham or Munich and so on. But actually, it's all this stuff. It's the stuff that means that actually the weather plays no part in our business at all. And in fact, we don't even have discussions about it. Lots of investors do. Lots of people who don't understand the organisation do. And we are always clearly defining all these things, the framework of the business and the businesses that we buy. And when we go over to France or Germany, this has all become part of the DNA of their businesses as well, because it is their businesses. And then the business plan. You all do that. We all do SWOT analysis. We all understand ourselves, or we always try to understand our competitors. But our SWOT analysis always finish off with a whole load of things that we're going to try and do to beat up our competitors like Unilever or Mars or Nestle in Europe. So it's not all just about what we're going to do. Will it close off the growth and attack our competitors? And it's good fun. And it makes sense to everybody. But generating all the change projects are the things. Those are just how the business has grown, and we started before that. Okay, we haven't increased the profitability too much in the last while. It tends to go up in stages in Europe because we're making much bigger changes and bigger investment. But we're still making 15% of turnover we're turning into cash. Still very high. In the UK it's slightly higher, and in France it's slightly lower. And now the biggest customer we have is actually Aldi still, because there's Aldi North and Aldi South, but that's only 10% of our business. And again, when we started with Morrison's, they were 40-odd% of our business. And you behave differently to all of them if nobody can really get at you, because they haven't got more than 10% of your business. So what are we doing? We're continuing to do that. And we're looking at businesses already in Turkey. We're looking at businesses in the Middle East. We won't be there for 2, 3, or 4 years. We're going to open up a joint venture factory in Moscow. It'll be small. It won't be a big game changer for us or for the Russian ice cream market. We already have a brand out there, and we're selling about 5 or 6 million euros in Moscow. So we're just going to continue to do the same things. We've invested in acquisitions out of cash flow. We've invested in CapEx, and that's increasing all the time now. Quite a few of the supermarket chains like Aldi and Lidl are becoming international. Tesco the same. So we're going with them, and they're helping us to get there. So that chocolate block is now being sold in Poland through Tesco. And Europe will become more consolidated, whether it has one currency or two, 25 different languages, 40 different countries. The economics of Europe will become more consolidated and will offer more opportunity. So it's a great place to go and do business. We will always be the lowest cost to operate. We don't have a business if you have a lot of dead overheads hanging around. They just don't exist. Other people do it quicker, better, and at lower cost. Keep growing the cash, and we'll always keep greedy, because that's the nature of business. So I've really said I would finish in time. I hope that was of interest to you. I know we were going rather fast through quite a lot of different things. Has anybody got any questions?
I think we've got a first question here. John Gilbert here with us today. John, hi there. Please to lead us off.
Yeah, in growing a business, it obviously takes a lot of energy and focus and really kind of time to take over your life. My question is really around whether it's possible to grow more than one business at a time. You mentioned in your presentation about bosses taking a distraction almost, but not taking their organisation with it. We're in a position at the moment where we grow one business. Our growth practice isn't anywhere near as sexy as yours.
No.
We're
business based in York, drugs for cats and dogs, and of which we've re-energised. As long as you don't interfere with the daily jobs that the team that you already have, the business that you already have, as long as they're allowed to stay focused and that you don't interfere with them and that they've got proper strategy and proper business plans, they know where they're going, you can have endless businesses if you've got the energy and the financing of it. I mean, you know, look at Branson, I don't know, but I mean, he has energised loads of different sectors in different ways and getting the right people in. I don't know what his daily routine is, but you know, hey, he's got a global businesses. So I think you can, but the thing you mustn't do, to me, is to destroy and disturb the people that are trying to make the first business successful.
Keith Ramsey from the Jigsaw Consultancy.
Hi, James. I was interested in you talking about sticking to the core, because obviously on your journey you've acquired a lot of companies and businesses. So for me, I'm interested in cultural change. You know, how have you managed all that cultural change, you know, cross-continent as well as in the UK? So it's obviously been quite an interesting journey.
I think that's a great question, and it is interesting because, you know, successful businesses tend to be very humorous places to work. I mean, you can, you know, the more successful the business, the greater humour. It's just wherever I see it, I just feel it in different businesses. So the cultural thing is and we have, as everybody knows, you know, UK people, British people, have a great sense of humour, and humour in businesses is so important. So success and sharing knowledge and sharing the dream and sharing the plans and sharing everything with your organisation is absolutely key to doing that. Now, when we went to Germany, that is exactly the opposite of how everything worked. A, because the business had gone bust, and so everything was in here, and people used to sit in offices that were all separate all around factories and plants and in town, and we put them all into one, we put everything into one big room. We get rid of a lot of periphery people, and in that business, you'd have thought a bankrupt business would have had no fat left in it. The business is still turning over in Germany 220 million euros out of that factory, and we took 12 million of overheads out, which is probably about a third of all the people. And these are people who are just sitting very busy in a bankrupt business doing something. So, and then the people that are left, once what we then did was put a lot of the senior managers over to meet our senior managers, not with directors there or not with any big cheeses there, and for get them to see how this funny business from North Yorkshire has ended up buying this huge factory in Germany. And you know, they're very educated, the French and German workforce. They got it very quickly, and they wanted to join in. They wanted to see how we measured our business. They wanted to see how we shared information. They wanted to see how open the organisation was. And you know, just because the guy was a director didn't mean that he had special knowledge. He didn't. His idea, his purpose. You know, and in France again, the humour and the culture is different. But you can still find a way of sharing the original DNA. So the senior managers again mix. We have some that go over. I'm very conscious that we do not tell each other what to do. We lead each other, which is a very different thing. In the end, you have to tell somebody it is the point of last resort. The main part of making a culture work is that people want to follow the leader. They want to follow the leadership of this organisation and its culture. And we spend a lot of time trying, and it's not feely touchy stuff. This is hard numbers, business success, volumes, brands. It's not, you know, arms around everybody. The result of a successful organisation is that your colleagues put your arms around each other. You know, they want to, but it's you've got to have success first, and you've got to have growth, and people have got to believe in the organisation. And that takes time, because the businesses we have nearly all bought have all been loss-making businesses.
I think we've got time for one last question. Susan Julie?
Oh, Susan, hi.
Thank you. Hello. Is innovation a necessary evil or a business driver?
I think innovation is just the most important thing in any organisation. Without it, an organisation will die. And I think because innovation is change as well. it's not just innovation of product, it's innovation of your organisation. And so I think it's the most important thing, and it's what drives in strategy all the change projects which then become part of your 3-year business plan. And so, and also, hey, I make ice cream. How great is that for a living? Innovation in products is really good fun. And bringing new route to market. I don't know if it's going to be successful. I just feel that we've done enough homework, talked to enough consumers to minimise the chance of that. But innovation, I think, is really key. The world is changing, and faster and faster, and it gives you more and more opportunities. I mean, companies that don't innovate die. Organisations, schools, any organisation that doesn't innovate just die. And it's a challenge for all of us. And it's not always successful at the start. And I think having impetus in an organisation means that it doesn't particularly matter if it isn't, because the next cut of it will be really successful. Because and if you can criticise us, which you can in lots of different things. One is sometimes we go too quickly, we bring things to market too quickly, we haven't done enough research of it. But the innovation that we've done is enough to get it into the next thing. So there's pots, for instance. If you look at the packaging, I don't think it's quite good enough at the moment. I don't think the product is. We're relaunching one in September. But we've already sold 15 million of them, and it was a new idea. So, innovation is impetus, energy. It's for me, it's absolutely key. And you can measure it, and we do, and of course. But actually, does this organisation, is it capable of innovating? Does it, do you want your day job disturbed because you've got to go? The engineers have got to build a new piece of plant. They don't. If they didn't believe that innovation was right, they would find ways of not doing it very productively. But they do. Anybody got one more question?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a great insight into a hugely successful